I'd like to have a conversation regarding gestational surrogacy if you're interested. Never before have men been allowed to control their reproductive fates on their own terms and regulate their own reproductive destinies. Men have never before been able to choose who the mother of their children will be, the gender of their offspring, or even who will carry their children through pregnancy. In the past, a woman's permission was required for a man to start a family, but this is no longer the case. Today, for the first time in history, men have the ability to choose who the mother of their children will be. It is estimated that a surrogate will cost roughly $40,000 in a country outside of the United States, Canada, or Europe. This is the price for a surgery that is now being carried out in Mexico and Thailand. This is the one and only factor that prevents the vast majority of males from adopting this reproductive strategy, and it is the one and only factor that prevents them from doing so. When I talk about surrogacy, I'm referring to gestational surrogacy, which is when a fertilized egg is placed into a third party, and that third party takes the baby to term. When I talk about surrogacy, I'm referring to gestational surrogacy. Although it can be done in other countries as well, the United States is by far the most common location for surrogacy procedures. The donor egg is typically purchased from a third party for approximately $5,000, and while it can be done in other countries as well, it can be said that the United States is the most common location. However, the price is far more expensive in the United States. In a great number of additional nations, including Canada and several areas of Europe, it is possible to acquire the procedure for a sum that is at least $100,000. Employing a surrogate is illegal in the United States unless the woman agrees to bear the child at no cost and does not receive any payment for her services as a surrogate. How many ladies do you know who would voluntarily go through the process of giving birth while carrying someone person's child if they were not compensated in some way? That is the same as arguing that prostitution is acceptable behavior so long as the prostitute does not benefit financially from her activities. How many women opt to go through the process of birthing while carrying another person's child? When it comes to the development of an artificial womb, I feel that it is still many decades away from being perfected, and I have no doubt that women will fight it tooth and nail if and when it ever comes into existence. By adopting the legislation in the manner in which they have, Western nations have, in effect, made surrogacy illegal. If you want to have your own children in this day and age without running the risk of losing custody of them to your wife or partner in the event of a divorce or a particularly contentious custody battle, your only option is to have them through surrogacy. This is the only method available to you if you want to have your own children. The major reason why people might now select to go through with gestational surrogacy is due to the fact that these women would typically hand over monetary compensation in order to have their fertilized eggs transferred into the body of a third party who would subsequently carry the pregnancy to term. Even if their uterus isn't functioning properly, this would make it possible for infertile mothers to have biological children of their own. It is thought that by doing so, women will be able to start families later in life, so avoiding the risks and difficulties involved with childbirth and considerably reducing the possibility that their offspring will be born with birth defects. It was never the intention of surrogacy to be a treatment for male reproductive problems, and I am confident that I speak for everyone when I say that the vast majority of people do not wish to give birth to children who have Down syndrome regardless of the availability of surrogacy. However, gay men started adopting this approach as their major reproductive technique in order to start children with it. They did this so they could have children using this way. Ricky Martin and Elton John are just a couple of the well-known men in the public eye who have been known to make use of HICA in the past. However, it has only been during the last 5 to 8 years that unmarried straight men have begun to explore surrogacy as a practical means of creating their own families. Prior to this time, surrogacy was not even on their radar. In recent years, there has been a general rise in interest in the practice of surrogacy. Despite this, there has been an increase in the number of people who are opposed to it as it has gained more popularity. In the beginning of 2013, India enacted a rule that made it illegal for unmarried heterosexual males who are LGBT to engage in the practice of surrogacy. In addition, males in unmarried relationships in India are subject to a number of other restrictions that have been imposed by the Indian government. These limitations are justified by reference to purportedly moral and ethical considerations. However, I feel that the real explanation lies in the fact that wombs are being outsourced, along with the implications that this has for the traditional male-to-female hierarchy in India. It has been going on for far too long that we have been led to believe in the myth of the patriarchy, when in reality, men have been treated as slaves by women in cultures that have been governed by matriarchy. One of the ways in which women might exhibit their dominance over men is by the position that they play as gatekeepers to reproduction in the context of guys' sexual gratification. The people of India have no problem taking employment in engineering, call centers, and factories away from citizens in Western nations and, as a result, destroying our economies. Women are aware of this fact, even if only on a subconscious level, because this is where the real power in our species resides, and males tend to be unaware of it. On the other hand, it is obvious that the process of subcontracting delivery has enraged them. This is especially true for the women of India, as they are the ones who are genuinely in charge of that country at this point. Anyway, whenever I tell a woman that I'm thinking about having a child through the use of a surrogate, I always get the same tired response: "Don't worry, I'm sure there's a woman out there for you, just be patient." This line of reasoning never fails to annoy me. Nevertheless, the fact of the matter is that I have reached the limit of my patience. I will be 35 years old this year, and although I have no desire to be married at this point in my life, I do want to be a parent someday. I want to be in charge of my own kids. I have no interest in being a parent, either by giving birth to my own or by adopting another person's children. And the cost of adoption would be the same as the cost of producing a child through surrogacy, and the majority of Western governments won't give children to single fathers unless there is a large supply of children who aren't wanted by their families. Additionally, the cost of adoption would be the same as the cost of producing a child through surrogacy. They are under the impression that they can get financial support from their ex-husbands in the state because the majority of single women in the state opt to keep custody of their children. On the other hand, this is not going to take place. It is possible for a guy to produce a kid on his own, without the assistance of a woman, and this can signal the end of a relationship, as it has in many instances in the past, and I believe this is what causes women to feel threatened by the concept of surrogacy. Surrogacy is a form of assisted reproduction that is performed by a gestational carrier. When it comes to the upbringing of their offspring, affluent alpha males, who only make up 10% of the male population but are admired by 60 to 70% of women, may choose to parent their children on their own. This is an ironic choice considering that only 10% of men make up the population. If these men have the financial means to pay for a nanny in addition to the fees associated with surrogacy, then they are still able to have children despite the irony and risks associated with traditional marriage. However, if these men do not have the financial means to pay for a nanny in addition to the fees associated with surrogacy, then they are unable to. The majority of these wealthy guys are aware of the hypergamy that is going on around them, and as a consequence, they may decide to investigate other options for reproduction in order to satisfy their sexual cravings. According to my point of view, a substantial percentage of people do not have an awareness of the parameters that must be met when selecting a surrogate mother and a donor egg. These requirements must be satisfied in order to have a successful surrogacy experience. What I've done up to this point has been successful. I've found the hospitals in Mexico that are the best fit for me, and I've been practically knowledgeable on where to discover websites that contain donor eggs. Since having knowledge is essentially equivalent to having power, I intend to educate myself about surrogacy in the not-too-distant future.